He was a ghost in the system, erased by his own family. But when he turned 18, an old key and a forgotten address sent him on a journey to reclaim a home he never knew he had, and a truth that could either save him or destroy him. My entire life has been lived in the spaces between files, in the margins of other people's paperwork. If you've ever felt invisible, like your own story was written in disappearing ink, then stick around. This community is for people who know what it's like to have to fight for your own existence. Hit that subscribe button because we're going to get through this together. The day I turned 18 was the quietest day of my life. There was no cake, no party, no off-key singing. There was just the sound of a key turning in a lock and the low hum of the fluorescent lights in the hallway of the St. Jude's Group Home for Boys. For 10 years, that hum had been the soundtrack to my life. It was the sound of waiting. Waiting for dinner, waiting for bedtime, waiting for a weekend pass that never came, waiting to be someone. And now I was waiting for the last time. Mrs. Gable, the home's director, stood in the doorway of her office, her face a familiar mask of weary compassion. She'd been a constant, a fixed point in a world of shifting foster parents and temporary placements before I landed here. "Leo," she said, her voice soft but firm, like it always was. "Everything's packed." I nodded, clutching the thin strap of the black duffel bag slung over my shoulder. It contained every single thing I owned in the world. 3 changes of clothes, a worn paperback copy of a book I'd read a dozen times, a toothbrush, and a faded photograph of a woman I was told was my mother. She was smiling, her eyes crinkled at the corners, and she was holding a baby, me. It was the only proof I had that I'd started somewhere else, that I hadn't just materialized on the steps of the system. Mrs. Gable handed me a large manila envelope. Inside was my birth certificate, a copy of a copy, my social security card, and $700 in cash. My final stipend, my severance package from a childhood I never really had. "This should get you started," she said, avoiding my eyes. "There's a room at the downtown shelter. They're expecting you. It's not much, but it's a place to land." A place to land. I'd been landing my whole life, always on hard ground. I nodded again, the lump in my throat too big to speak around. This was it, the moment I had both dreaded and longed for. Freedom. It felt less like an open door and more like being pushed off a cliff. She started to close the office door, the final act of my institutionalized life, but then she paused. "Oh, wait, I almost forgot. This came for you. A few weeks ago." She turned back to her desk, shuffling through a pile of papers. She pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It felt heavy, important. My name was written on the front, in elegant, looping cursive, Leo Blackwood. Below it was the address for St. Jude's. No one sent me mail, ever. My file listed no known relatives, no emergency contacts. I was an island. "Who's it from?" I asked, my voice raspy. "A law firm," she said, handing it to me. "Harris, Albright, and Dunn. Out in Sparrow Creek. Never heard of it." I turned the envelope over in my hands. The paper was thick, expensive. It felt like something from another world. I tore it open carefully, my fingers trembling slightly. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a large, old-fashioned skeleton key, heavy and ornate, made of dark, tarnished brass. The letter was brief, typed on formal letterhead. "Dear Mr. Blackwood, this letter serves as official notification regarding the estate of your grandfather, Mr. Thomas Blackwood. In accordance with his last will and testament, upon your 18th birthday, you are to inherit the entirety of his property, known as Blackwood Ranch, located at 14 Sparrow Creek Road, Sparrow Creek, Montana. Enclosed, you will find the key to the main house. We advise you to contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the legal transfer and other pertinent matters. We understand this may come as a surprise. Sincerely, Eleanor Albright, Esq." I read it once, then twice, then a third time. The words swam in front of my eyes. Grandfather, ranch, inheritance. They were words from a movie, from a story about someone else. My file said my grandparents were deceased. It said my mother died in a car accident when I was a baby, and my father was whereabouts unknown. The system had been my only guardian. This letter felt like a mistake, a cruel joke, but the key in my palm was real. It was heavy and cold and solid. It was the most substantial thing I had ever held. "What is it?" Mrs. Gable asked, her curiosity piqued by my silence. It says I have a grandfather," I whispered, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "And he left me a ranch." She frowned, a look of genuine confusion on her face. "Leo, your file is very clear. We've done searches over the years. There's no one." "This says there is," I insisted, holding out the letter like a shield. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something other than resignation. It was a tiny, dangerous spark of hope. What if my file was wrong? What if my whole life, the story I'd been told about myself, was wrong? The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to fade. In its place, I could almost hear the whisper of wind through pine trees, the creak of an old wooden porch. It was a sound I'd never heard, but suddenly I felt like I was supposed to. I looked down at the key, then back at Mrs. Gable. The shelter, the duffel bag, the $700. That was one path, the path that had been laid out for me. But this key, this letter, this was another, a path I never knew existed, a path that led home. I spent my first night of freedom in a cramped, musty room at the city bus station, waiting for the 5 a.m. departure to Montana. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the hard plastic chair, the duffel bag at my feet and the heavy key in my pocket, its teeth pressing into my thigh. It was a constant reminder that this was real. The letter was spread out on my lap, the crisp paper already starting to soften from how many times I had folded and unfolded it. I'd used $100 of my stipend to buy the bus ticket, a one-way trip into the unknown. Every instinct I had, every lesson learned over a decade of surviving the system screamed at me that this was a mistake. Hope was a trap. It was the thing that broke you when it disappeared. It was safer to expect nothing, to rely on no one. But the name, Blackwood Ranch, it echoed in my head. Blackwood was my name. It was the one thing that connected me to that smiling woman in the photograph. To have a place with that name on it, it felt like an anchor in the storm of my life. I had to know. I had to see it. Even if it was just a shack on a patch of dirt, it was mine. It was proof that someone, somewhere had thought of me, that someone had remembered I existed. The next morning, I found a payphone in the corner of the station, the receiver sticky and smelling of stale cigarettes. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number for the law firm. It felt like I was making a call to a foreign country. After 2 rings, a crisp, professional voice answered, "Harris, Albright, and Dunn. How may I help you?" "Hello," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again. "My name is Leo Blackwood. I received a letter from you." There was a pause on the other end, the sound of a pen tapping on a desk. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Eleanor Albright. We've been expecting your call. I assume you're turning 18 today?" "Yes, I am." The words felt momentous. I am 18. I am Leo Blackwood. I exist. "Happy birthday, then," she said, her tone softening slightly, though it remained businesslike. "I am the executor of your grandfather's will. There is a great deal to discuss. The ranch is, as the letter stated, legally yours. However, there has been a complication." My stomach tightened. Of course there was a complication. There was always a complication. "What kind of complication?" "Your uncle, Marcus Thorne, your mother's brother, has filed a petition with the probate court," she explained, her voice steady and calm. like a doctor delivering bad news. He is contesting the will. He claims that you, the named heir, are deceased. He has argued that Thomas, your grandfather, was not of sound mind in his final years and was clinging to the fantasy that you were still alive. The world tilted. My uncle. I had an uncle. My file was a blank page, a void. And now suddenly a family was appearing out of the ether, but they were trying to erase me. But I'm not dead. I'm right here. I'm talking to you. I'm aware of that, Leo, she said, and for the first time I heard a hint of empathy in her voice. But the court is not. Marcus presented some compelling, if misleading, evidence. He provided a statement from the director of the orphanage where you were initially placed as a child, before you were moved to St. Jude's. The director stated under oath that they had no record of a Leo Blackwood ever being in their care. The name was simply not in their system. I sank onto the cold tile floor, the phone pressed hard against my ear. It didn't make any sense. How could they have no record of me? I was there for years. That's impossible. Marcus is arguing that your grandfather invented your continued existence out of grief. He's petitioning the court to be named the sole heir as the only surviving blood relative, Ms. Albright continued. And frankly, the judge is leaning in his favor. A sworn statement from an institution carries a great deal of weight. Your uncle's story, tragic as he tells it, is the only one the court has heard. He has spent the last year telling everyone in Sparrow Creek that his poor lost nephew finally has a death certificate. My breath caught in my chest. He hadn't just said I was missing. He'd declared me dead. He had systematically erased me, turning my life into a sad story he could tell for sympathy, all to get his hands on a piece of land. The tiny spark of hope from the day before was now engulfed in a wave of cold, familiar rage. It was the rage of being powerless, of being a name on a file that someone else could stamp, change, or discard at will. What can I do? I asked, the question feeling heavy and hopeless. You can come here, she said simply. You can walk into my office. You can stand before the judge. Your physical presence is the one piece of evidence your uncle can't argue against. But you have to do it soon. The final hearing is in 2 weeks. If you're not here to claim what's yours, the court will award the ranch to Marcus, and it will be lost to you forever. She gave me the address to her office and told me to call when my bus got in. After we hung up, I stayed on the floor for a long time, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. My uncle, a man I'd never met, a name I'd never heard, had tried to legally execute me. He had used the very system that was supposed to protect me to render me invisible. It wasn't just about a ranch anymore. It was about my life, my name, the simple, undeniable fact of my own existence. I got to my feet, my legs shaking but steady. I picked up my duffel bag and walked towards the gate for the bus to Montana. I was no longer running towards a vague hope. I was walking into a fight. The bus ride was a long, slow crawl across a changing map. For 2 days I watched the concrete and steel of the city bleed into sprawling suburbs, then into the vast, open plains of the Midwest. The world outside my window grew bigger, emptier. The sky seemed to stretch on forever, a massive blue canvas that made me feel impossibly small. I was surrounded by strangers, each lost in their own world, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones or a booklight. I felt more alone than I ever had at St. Jude's. There, at least, the loneliness was a shared condition. Here it was mine and mine alone. I kept my hand in my pocket, my fingers wrapped around the old brass key. It was my compass, my one true thing. I thought about my uncle, Marcus. I tried to picture his face, but all I could conjure was a blank space. What kind of person declares their own nephew dead for a piece of land? What kind of emptiness lives inside someone to make them do that? I thought about my grandfather, Thomas Blackwood, the man who had written my name into his will, who had left me a key. He had remembered me. In a world that had forgotten me, he had held on. The two men felt like opposing forces, a devil and an angel on shoulders I didn't even know I had. I was traveling towards the collision of their two stories, and I was trapped in the middle. Sparrow Creek wasn't so much a town as a punctuation mark on a long, empty highway. A single main street was lined with brick buildings from a century ago, their facades weathered and proud. There was a diner with a buzzing neon sign, a hardware store, a post office, and a small grocery. The bus hissed to a stop in front of a dusty storefront that served as the station. When I stepped off, the air was different. It was crisp and clean, smelling of pine and damp earth and something else, something wild and free. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant caw of a bird and the rumble of the bus pulling away, leaving me in a cloud of diesel fumes. I was an alien here. My city clothes, my nervous energy, my very presence felt loud and out of place. I asked an old man sitting on a bench for directions to the lawyer's office. He looked me up and down with pale, watery eyes. "You're not from around here," he said. It wasn't a question. "No, sir," I replied, "just got in." He nodded slowly, then pointed a gnarled finger down the street. "Harris, Albright and Dunn is in the old bank building, next to the diner. Can't miss it. Big stone pillars out front." The law office was exactly as he described it. It felt imposing, like a place where important decisions were made. The name was etched in a brass plaque beside the heavy oak door. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding against my ribs, and walked inside. The air was cool and smelled of old paper and lemon polish. A young woman at a reception desk looked up and gave me a polite, practiced smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Eleanor Albright," I said. "My name is Leo Blackwood." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly before she caught herself. The name clearly meant something to her. To everyone in this town, Leo Blackwood was a ghost, a tragic local story, and here I was, flesh and blood, standing in their quiet, orderly office. "Of course," she said, her composure returning. "She's expecting you. Please, have a seat." A few minutes later, a door opened and a woman emerged. She was probably in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and graying hair, pulled back in a neat twist. She wore a simple tailored suit. She wasn't smiling, but her expression wasn't unkind. It was direct, appraising. This was Eleanor Albright. "Leo," she said, her voice the same calm, steady tone from the phone. "Thank you for coming. Please come in." Her office was lined with books from floor to ceiling. A large wooden desk sat in front of a tall window that looked out onto the main street. She gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs opposite her. I felt small and out of my depth, like a child called into the principal's office. "The journey was all right?" she asked, sitting down. "It was long," I said. She nodded. "I imagine it was." She folded her hands on the desk and looked at me directly. "Let's not waste any time. Your uncle has built a powerful narrative. He's a well-liked man in this community. His story is that his sister, your mother, ran off with a man he calls no good, got pregnant and was tragically killed. He claims he searched for you for years, but eventually had to accept you were lost, likely dead. He paints your grandfather as a man broken by grief, unable to let go, creating a fantasy to cope with the loss of his daughter and grandson. Every word was a punch, a story built on lies with me as the tragic, absent centerpiece. But why? Why go to all that trouble? "Money, Leo," she said, her voice flat. "Always money. Blackwood Ranch is over 2,000 acres. It's not prime ranching land anymore. The soil is rocky, but it has extensive water rights from the Sparrow River, and it borders the national forest. A development company, Horizon Corporation, has been trying to buy up land in this valley for the last 5 years. They want to build a high-end, exclusive resort with a golf course. Your grandfather refused to sell. He despised them. But your uncle, he's been in negotiations with them for months, anticipating he would inherit. The offer on the table is for $8 million. I stared at her, the number hanging in the air between us. $8 million. It was an amount I couldn't even comprehend. It was more money than I had ever imagined existed in one place, and my uncle was willing to erase me, to declare me dead, for it. He can't have it, I said, the words coming out with a force that surprised me. It's mine. A faint smile touched Ms. Albright's lips. Good. That's what I was hoping you'd say, but saying it isn't enough. We have to prove it. She reached down beside her desk and lifted a sturdy cardboard box, placing it on the polished wood between us. Your grandfather left this for you, with me. He was a very meticulous man. He knew your uncle, and he knew what he was capable of. He left instructions that I was to give this to you personally, and only to you. The box was sealed with packing tape. My name was written on the top in thick black marker. It felt like another piece of the puzzle, another breadcrumb left for me by a man I couldn't remember. Ms. Albright slid a letter opener across the desk. Go on, she said. It belongs to you. My hands trembled as I cut the tape and opened the flaps. The box smelled of dust and cedar and thyme. Inside, nestled in yellowed tissue paper, were stacks of old photographs. A younger version of the woman in my picture, my mother, laughing on a horse. A stern-looking man with kind eyes who must have been my grandfather, standing on a porch. There were baby pictures of me, held in my mother's arms, wrapped in a blue blanket. Proof, tangible proof of a life before the system. Beneath the photos was a thick, leather-bound deed to the ranch, the paper brittle with age. And under that, at the very bottom, was another envelope. It was sealed with wax, the imprint of a bee pressed into it. On the front, in the same elegant cursive as the first letter, were the words, for Leo, to be opened on your 18th birthday at the ranch, not before. I looked up at Ms. Albright. Her expression was unreadable. He wanted you to be there, she said softly. He believed that place was a part of you, your birthright. I held the letter in my hand. It was the key to everything. I could feel it. The answers to why I was put in an orphanage, why my uncle was lying, why my grandfather had to hide me. But the instructions were clear. I had to go to the ranch. I had to be home. How do I get there? I asked. She pulled a set of keys from her desk drawer. Not an old-fashioned skeleton key, but a modern set for a car. There's a truck, your grandfather's. It's in the garage behind my office. It's old, but it runs. It's yours now, too. She paused, her gaze intense. Leo, be careful. Marcus has been acting like he owns that place for a year. He won't be happy to see you. Don't go looking for a confrontation. Just go home. The drive out to the ranch was only 10 miles, but it felt like a journey to another century. The paved road gave way to gravel, and the gravel gave way to a dirt lane marked by a rusted metal archway that read Blackwood Ranch. The gate was held shut by a heavy chain, but it wasn't locked. I undid the latch and pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. I drove the old pickup truck, a faded blue Ford that smelled of gasoline and hay, through the gate and up the long, winding driveway. The land on either side was wild and overgrown, dotted with pine trees and sagebrush. It was beautiful and untamed. Then the house came into view. It was a 2-story farmhouse built of dark, weathered wood with a wide, wraparound porch. It wasn't grand, but it was solid. It looked like it had grown out of the earth itself. Paint was peeling from the siding and a few shingles were missing from the roof, but it stood straight and proud against the backdrop of the mountains. It looked like a place that kept secrets. I parked the truck and walked up the steps, my boots echoing on the wooden planks. I pulled the old brass key from my pocket. It slid into the lock on the front door with a satisfying click. The door swung open into a world of dust and silence. Sunlight streamed through the dirty windows, illuminating floating particles of dust in thick, golden shafts. The air was still and cool, thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. The furniture was covered in white sheets, ghostly shapes in the dim light. I pulled one off a large armchair, revealing faded floral upholstery. I ran my hand over the dusty surface of a wooden mantelpiece above a massive stone fireplace. On the mantel were more photos. My mother as a girl. My grandfather with a woman who must have been my grandmother. A whole life, a whole family, frozen in time. For the first time in my entire life, I was standing in a place that was mine. Not a temporary room, not a bunk in a dormitory, but a home. My home. The feeling was so overwhelming I had to sit down on the dusty floor, my back against the armchair. I felt a deep, aching sense of loss for the life I never had here, for the people in these photos I never knew. But underneath the grief, something else was taking root, a sense of belonging. I remembered the letter, to be opened, at the ranch. I was here. I pulled the wax-sealed envelope from my jacket pocket. My fingers were clumsy as I broke the seal and unfolded the pages within. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope, strong and clear. My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, it means you have come home. It means you are 18, a man, and I am gone. There are not words enough in this world to tell you how sorry I am for the life you have had. I know you must have felt abandoned, alone. I need you to know, with all my heart, that you were never, ever unwanted. You were loved more fiercely than you can imagine. And everything I did to protect that love. Your mother, my sweet Clara, was the light of my life. When she brought you into this world, that light grew tenfold. But she fell in love with a man who walked in darkness. Your father was charming, intelligent, but he was tangled up in dangerous business with dangerous people. I tried to warn her, but she saw a goodness in him that she wanted to save. After you were born, he tried to leave that life behind, but it wouldn't let him go. They came for him, and when they couldn't find him, they came for her. My hands started to shake. I kept reading. Your mother's car. Accident was no accident, Leo. It was a message, a warning. Your father disappeared after that, but I knew his enemies wouldn't stop looking. They weren't just after him. They were after something he had hidden, something that could destroy them. I knew they would eventually come looking for you, the last piece of him left in the world. I couldn't keep you here. It wasn't safe. The ranch was the first place they would look, so I did the only thing I could think of. I made you disappear. I took you to an old orphanage run by a woman who owed me a great debt. You were enrolled under a different name, a name I have taken to my grave. It was the only way to sever the trail, to make sure no one could connect you to the Blackwood name or to your father. It broke my heart to leave you there, to walk away from my only grandchild. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I visited sometimes. I would park down the road and watch the children play in the yard, hoping to catch a glimpse of you, just to know you were all right. Forgive me, son. I chose your life over your happiness. I hope one day you can understand. Tears were streaming down my face, dripping onto the brittle pages. I wasn't abandoned. I was protected. I wasn't a mistake left behind. I was a treasure that had been hidden away for safekeeping. The story of my life, the one I had told myself in the dark for 10 years, the story of being unwanted, unloved, forgotten. It was all a lie told to keep me alive. Your Uncle Marcus knows some of this, the letter continued, and my blood ran cold. He knows about your father's associates. He was always weak, your uncle, always looking for an easy dollar. I fear he may have been tempted by them. He will try to take this ranch from you. Do not let him. This land is more than just dirt and trees, Leo. It is your sanctuary. It is your legacy. It is the one place on earth you can stand your ground and be safe. The truth of what your father left behind is buried with the roots of this family. It is both a poison and a cure. You must choose which it will be. Look for the old oak on the western ridge, the one struck by lightning. What you need is there. Be strong, my boy. You have Blackwood blood in you. You are a survivor. This is your home now. Defend it. All my love, your grandfather, Thomas. I sat there in the dusty silence of the house, the letter clutched in my hand, my world completely remade. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was a guardian. I had a history, a family, a purpose, and I had a fight on my hands. Just as that realization settled over me, a new sound broke the silence, the sound of an engine. I scrambled to the window and peered out. A sleek, black SUV was making its way up the long driveway. It came to a stop behind my grandfather's old truck, and a man got out. He was tall, dressed in expensive clothes that looked out of place against the wild landscape. He had a smooth, handsome face that I recognized vaguely from the old photographs on the mantel. It was my uncle, Marcus, and he did not look happy to see the old Ford parked in his spot. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs, watching the man who had tried to erase me walk up the steps of the home he was trying to steal. He saw the front door was open and his pace quickened. He stepped inside, his eyes sweeping the room, adjusting to the dim light. Then they landed on me. For a moment he just stared, his mouth slightly agape. It was the face of a man seeing a ghost. "You," he breathed, his voice a mixture of shock and fury. "How did you get here?" "It's my house," I said, my own voice steadier than I felt. "My grandfather left it to me." He quickly recovered his composure, a practiced, charming smile spreading across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were cold, hard chips of ice. "Kid, you don't understand. This is a mistake, a misunderstanding. My father, your grandfather, he wasn't well at the end. He got confused. He wanted to believe you were still out there somewhere, but you're not. He was talking to me as if I wasn't real, as if I were a hallucination he needed to dispel." "I'm standing right here," I said, taking a step forward. "I'm Leo Blackwood." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Look, I don't know who you are or what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but this isn't going to work. The court has already been presented with the facts. Leo Blackwood is gone." "Your facts are lies," I shot back, the anger I felt giving me courage. "You lied to the court. You lied to everyone." His smile vanished. The mask was off. "You have no idea what you're getting into. This place is not for you. It's a weight. It's a burden. You're just a kid who aged out of the system. What are you going to do with 2,000 acres of rock and debt?" He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But I can help you. I'm your family after all. I feel a certain responsibility." He reached into the inner pocket of his blazer and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the dusty coffee table between us. It landed with a soft thud. "There's $50,000 in there. Cash, all yours. You sign a few papers, relinquish any claim this crazy will gives you, and you walk away. You can go anywhere, start a new life, be anyone you want to be. It's more money than you've ever seen. Take it, disappear. It's the best thing for everyone." I stood there, looking at the man who tried to erase me, holding an offer that could give me the easy life I never had. $50,000. It was a fortune. It was a plane ticket to anywhere. It was a clean slate. Everything in me that had been trained to survive, to take the path of least resistance, screamed to take the deal. But then I looked around the room at the ghostly furniture and the faded photographs, and I thought of my grandfather's letter. This is your home now. Defend it. What would you do? Sometimes the easiest choice is the hardest one to live with. It's the choice that haunts you in the quiet moments, the one that asks you what you were willing to sell your soul for. If you've ever faced a moment like that, a choice that defined who you were going to be, let me know in the comments. This is a community of people who understand that the right path is almost never the easy one. Now, let's get back to what I decided. I looked from the envelope stuffed with cash to my uncle's expectant face. The smile was back, confident, predatory. He thought he had me. He saw a poor, desperate orphan, and he was dangling the keys to a kingdom I could never have imagined. But he wasn't seeing me. He was seeing the ghost he had created. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it filled the entire house. His smile wavered. "What did you say?" "I said no," I repeated, louder this time, stronger. "This is my home. You're not getting it." The charm evaporated completely, replaced by a dark, simmering rage. "You foolish little brat," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea what you're turning down. You think you can fight me. You think you can fight Horizon Corporation. You're nothing. A piece of paper in a file that I had erased. I can do it again." "You can try," I said, standing my ground. I felt a strength I'd never known, a solidity that came from the floorboards beneath my feet. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my mother, for the grandfather who had sacrificed everything to keep me safe. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a venomous hatred. "You will regret this," he said, his voice a cold promise. "You will wish you had taken the money." He turned on his heel, stormed out the front door, and slammed it behind him. I watched through the window as he got into his SUV, spun it around in a spray of gravel, and sped back down the driveway, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. I was alone again, but the silence in the house felt different now. It wasn't empty, it was charged with purpose. I looked at the envelope on the table. $50,000, a fortune yesterday, an insult today. I left it there, a testament to the choice I had made. I had my grandfather's letter, his warning, and his final clue. Look for the old oak on the western ridge, the one struck by lightning. What you need is there. I spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the ranch. I walked through the overgrown fields, my boots sinking into the soft earth. I found the old barn, its roof sagging but its frame still strong. Inside, it smelled of hay and leather and horses that had been gone for decades. I walked down to the creek, the water running clear and cold over smooth stones. This was my land. Every tree, every rock, every blade of grass. The thought was staggering. As the sun began to dip towards the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, I made my way towards the western ridge. It was a steep climb, but I found a faint trail that snaked its way up through the pines. And then I saw it. At the very crest of the ridge stood a massive oak tree. It was ancient, its trunk thick and gnarled, its branches reaching for the sky like twisted arms. A long, dark scar ran the length of its trunk, a testament to a long-ago battle with a lightning storm. It had survived, just like me. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. It is both a poison and a cure. You must choose which it will be. I started searching around the base of the tree, my hands digging into the soil and the thick mat of fallen leaves. I didn't know what I was looking for. A loose stone? A marker? After nearly an hour of searching, my fingers brushed against something hard and flat just beneath the surface, wedged between two of the tree's massive roots. It was a stone, but it felt different from the others. I dug around it, pulling it free. It was a square flagstone, and it had been covering a dark, hollow space. My heart pounded. I reached into the hole. My fingers found a cold metal handle. I pulled, and with a grunt of effort, I lifted a heavy, waterproof metal box from the earth. It was about the size of a briefcase, and it was locked with a heavy-duty padlock. There was no key. I had to get it open. I carried the box back to the barn, the weight of it a tangible mystery in my arms. I found an old crowbar and a hammer in a dusty toolbox. It took me 20 minutes of sweat and frustration, the sound of metal striking metal echoing in the cavernous barn. But finally, the lock broke with a loud crack. I lifted the lid. I was expecting, I don't know, money, gold, something out of a movie. But it wasn't treasure, not in that sense. The contents were mundane, but felt infinitely more valuable. On top was a small leather-bound ledger. Beneath it was a burner phone, an old, simple flip phone, and a small black USB drive. I opened the ledger. The pages were filled with neat, precise columns of dates, names, and numbers. It looked like an accounting book, but the names weren't ordinary. They were followed by notations that made no sense at first. Shipment, delivery, transfer. And next to some of the entries there were names of corporations, including one I recognized, Horizon Corporation. I suddenly understood. This was my father's. This was the record of his dealings. This was the poison my grandfather had written about. This was the evidence of the criminal enterprise he was a part of. He hadn't just been a low-level thug. He'd been their bookkeeper. He knew where all the money was, how it was moved, how it was laundered, and Horizon Corporation wasn't just a legitimate development company buying up land. They were part of it. They were the way the dirty money became clean. This was why they wanted the ranch. It wasn't just about the water rights or the location for a resort. My uncle hadn't been negotiating a simple land deal. He was in bed with them. He knew this evidence existed, and he was helping them get the land so they could find it and destroy it forever. My father hadn't just been planning to leave his old life. The ledger, the phone, the drive. He had been compiling evidence. He was going to turn on them, to expose them. His death, and my mother's, wasn't just a warning. It was a silencing. The full weight of it crashed down on me. This was so much bigger than an inheritance dispute. This was organized crime, murder, and I was holding the one thing they were terrified of. The cure. The thing that could bring them all down. My grandfather hadn't just hidden me to keep me safe. He had hidden this evidence, preserving it, waiting for a day when someone would be strong enough to use it. He had left the choice to me. I could destroy it, walk away, and be safe. Or I could use it, get justice for my parents, and risk everything. There was no $50,000 offer on the table now. There was only a choice between my life and the truth. I packed the box carefully and drove back into town as darkness fell. The lights of Sparrow Creek seemed dimmer, the quiet streets more menacing. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. I went straight to Ms. Albright's office. The lights were still on. I knocked on the heavy oak door. She opened it herself, her expression shifting from surprise to concern when she saw my face. "Leo, what is it? What happened?" "I need to show you something," I said, my voice low. I followed her back to her office and closed the door behind us. I placed the metal box on her desk and opened it. I pushed the ledger towards her. My grandfather's letter told me where to find this. It belonged to my father. She picked it up, her brow furrowed in concentration as she flipped through the pages. I watched her face, saw the moment she understood. Her professional calm finally cracked. Her eyes widened and she put a hand to her mouth. She looked from the ledger to me, her expression a mixture of awe and terror. "My God, Leo," she whispered, "do you have any idea what this is?" "I think so," I said. "It's why they killed my mother. It's why my uncle wants this land so badly. Horizon Corporation. They're criminals." She sank into her chair, her gaze distant. For a long moment she was silent. She looked older, more tired than she had that afternoon. "Thomas," she said softly, more to herself than to me, "you magnificent, stubborn old man. You really thought of everything." She looked back at me, her eyes sharp again, focused. "Your grandfather was my client for 20 years. He was more than that. He was my friend. He told me he was worried about Marcus, that he was getting involved with the Horizon people. He never told me the details. He just said he had an insurance policy in place to protect the ranch and to protect you." She tapped the ledger with her finger. "This is it. This is the insurance policy, and it's a bomb." She stood up and began to pace the small office. "We can't go to the local authorities. Horizon has a lot of people on their payroll. We have no idea who we can trust." "So what do we do?" I asked, feeling a rising tide of panic. "Do we just give it to them? Do I run?" She stopped pacing and looked at me, her expression fierce. "No, we do not run. Your grandfather didn't hide this for you to run. He hid it for you to fight. But we have to be smart. We have to be strategic." She walked to her desk and picked up the phone. "I have a contact, a man I went to law school with. He's with the State Attorney General's office, runs the organized crime division. He's the one person I know I can trust implicitly. He owes me a favor." She dialed a number from memory. "David, it's Eleanor Albright. Yes, it's been too long. Listen, I have something big. It involves the Horizon Corporation development in Sparrow Creek. No, bigger than that. Much bigger. I have a witness, and I have evidence. The kind of evidence that brings down empires." "Yes, I'm sure, but we have to be careful. The situation here is delicate. My witness is in danger." She listened for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, we'll be waiting." She hung up the phone and turned to me, her face set with grim determination. "They're sending a team. Unmarked cars. They'll be here by morning. Until then, you are not to leave this office. You will stay here with me. It's the safest place for you right now." The hours that followed were the longest of my life. Ms. Albright made coffee and we sat in her office, the ledger and the USB drive sitting on the desk between us like a sleeping dragon. She told me stories about my grandfather, about his stubbornness, his love for the land, his deep and abiding grief over the loss of my mother. She filled in the empty spaces of my past, giving me a history, a context for the man who had saved my life from a distance. As she spoke, I felt my connection to him, to this place, grow deeper, stronger. This wasn't just a fight against my uncle anymore. It was a duty. It was a legacy. We developed a plan. When the investigators arrived, we would hand over the originals. But first, we made copies. Ms. Albright had a high-end scanner, and we spent 2 hours meticulously scanning every single page of the ledger. We copied the contents of the USB drive. The drive contained spreadsheets that mirrored the ledger, but also audio files. I clicked on one. A man's voice, smooth and confident, was talking about moving funds through a series of shell companies. It was my uncle, Marcus. My father had been recording him. The plan was simple, but dangerous. The state investigators wanted to catch Marcus and his Horizon partners in the act. They wanted more than just old evidence. They wanted a fresh crime. They asked me if I would be willing to help. They wanted me to call my uncle and tell him I had reconsidered his offer. I was to agree to a meeting, to sign the papers and hand over the ranch in exchange for the money. The meeting would be at Ms. Albright's office. It would be under surveillance. "You don't have to do this, Leo," Ms. Albright said, her hand on my arm. "It's dangerous. These are not good people." I thought about the photograph of my mother, her smiling face. I thought about my grandfather watching me from a distance, protecting me in the only way he knew how. I thought about the 10 years I spent feeling like nothing, like a ghost. This was my chance to be real. to have my existence mean something. I have to, I said. For them. For me. The meeting was set for the following afternoon. The morning was a blur of quiet, intense activity. Two plainclothes investigators, a man and a woman who introduced themselves as Miller and Diaz, arrived and set up discreet surveillance equipment in Ms. Albright's office. A tiny microphone under the desk, a camera hidden in a bookshelf. They fitted me with a wire, a small device taped to my chest that felt cold against my skin. They prepped me, told me what to say, how to act scared, act greedy, act like the desperate orphan Marcus believed me to be. It was a role I knew how to play. I'd been playing it my whole life. At 2 o'clock, Marcus's black SUV pulled up outside. He wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit got out with him, a man who carried himself with an air of cold authority. This was the man from Horizon. They walked into the office, their faces smug and triumphant. They thought they had won. "Well, well," Marcus said, a wide, false smile on his face as he saw me sitting in the chair opposite Ms. Albright's desk. "I knew you'd come to your senses. Smart kid." The man from Horizon, whose name was Renner, didn't bother with pleasantries. He placed a heavy briefcase on the desk and opened it. It was filled with stacks of $100 bills. A second, slimmer briefcase contained the legal documents. "Everything is in order," Renner said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Sign the papers. The property is ours. The money is yours. And Mr. Blackwood," he said, his eyes locking onto mine, "ceases to exist." My blood ran cold. He said it so casually. Ceases to exist. That was what this was all about. Erasing me, erasing my father, erasing the past. Ms. Albright reviewed the documents with painstaking slowness, creating tension, buying time. Finally, she nodded at me. "It's all standard. It's up to you, Leo." I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was from the sheer electric force of what was about to happen. I looked at Marcus, at his greedy, smiling face. "You know," I said, my voice quiet. "My grandfather wrote me a letter. He told me this ranch was my home, that I should defend it." Marcus's smile tightened. "Your grandfather was a sentimental old fool. Sign the paper, kid." I looked down at the contract, then back up at them, and I let the mask fall away. "He also told me where my father hid his insurance policy." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the leather-bound ledger. I placed it on the desk on top of their contract. "I believe you two are familiar with this." The change in the room was instantaneous. The air crackled. The color drained from Marcus's face. Renner's cold composure shattered, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated fury. He lunged across the desk, reaching for the ledger. "It's over," I said. At that exact moment, the office door burst open. Miller and Diaz entered, their badges out, their weapons drawn. "State investigators, nobody move." The smugness, the power, the confidence, it all vanished from my uncle and Renner in a heartbeat, replaced by the pathetic, cornered look of common criminals. As they were being handcuffed, Marcus looked at me, his face a twisted mask of hatred and disbelief. "You," he spat, "you were supposed to be nothing." I met his gaze, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a scared kid. I felt like a Blackwood. "I'm everything you tried to erase," I said. The aftermath was long and messy. The investigation into Horizon Corporation blew up into a massive statewide scandal, pulling in politicians and business leaders. My uncle, facing a mountain of evidence, turned state's witness against his former partners for a reduced sentence. The ranch was tied up in legal proceedings for almost a year, but with the evidence from my father and the testimony from Ms. Albright, the court's decision was never in doubt. My grandfather's will was upheld. I was officially, legally, and irrefutably Leo Blackwood, owner of Blackwood Ranch. It's been 2 years since that day. I live at the ranch now. It's slow work, bringing the place back to life. I've fixed the roof and painted the house. I've started clearing the fields. The old Ford truck is my constant companion. It's not a fancy life, but it's a real one. It's a life I built with my own 2 hands, on land that is soaked in the history of my family. Ms. Albright is still my lawyer, but she's become more than that. She's a friend, a mentor, a connection to the grandfather I never got to thank. The town of Sparrow Creek, which once saw me as a ghost or a fraud, now sees me as one of their own. People I don't even know will sometimes leave a pie on my porch, or offer to help me mend a fence. They know the story now. They know the truth. Sometimes at night, I walk up to the western ridge and stand under the old oak tree. I look down at the lights of my house, a single point of warmth in the vast darkness of the valley. I think about the poison and the cure my grandfather wrote about. The poison was the legacy of crime and violence my father left behind. The cure was the truth, and the choice was the responsibility of what to do with it. I have scars, the years in the system, the feeling of being invisible, that doesn't just wash away, but they don't define me anymore. They're just a part of my story, a story that I got to finish on my own terms. My grandfather wrote that the ranch was a responsibility. I think I finally understand what he meant. It wasn't about the land or the money. It was the responsibility of choosing who you want to be, of taking the broken pieces of your past and building something that can stand. If my story taught you anything, I hope it's that your existence is not up for debate. You are real, you matter, and your story deserves to be heard. If you agree, subscribe to this channel. We're building a community here for stories just like this. And in the comments below, tell me one thing you're fighting to protect in your own life. I'll be reading every single one. Thank you for listening.